The wine in my glass was a 2014 Camus Cabernet, and my father had ordered 3 cases of it for his 60th birthday at the Bellagio. I remember that detail because it cost him almost $9,000, which was funny to me, since I was the one who had quietly paid off his second mortgage 2 years ago, when he didn't know who else to call. The ballroom on the Lakeview floor was packed with maybe 150 people. Vegas in late October. Cool air outside, but the room was warm with body heat and that particular smell of expensive perfume mixing with butter from the lobster station. My father stood at a small wooden podium that the hotel had set up between 2 enormous arrangements of white lilies. He was tapping a butter knife against his glass like he was about to give a toast at someone else's wedding. He cleared his throat the way he always did before saying something he wanted everyone to remember. And then he said it. He said that for his 60th birthday, he didn't want to receive a gift. He wanted to give one. He wanted to give the lake house, the 4-bedroom cabin on Lake Tahoe, the place where my grandmother had taught me how to gut a trout when I was 9, to my brother and his new wife as a wedding/fresh start present. The room burst into applause, the kind of applause that's already half drunk. My brother whooped and pulled his wife into a hug that knocked her clutch off the table. She laughed and pressed her hand to her chest like she was about to faint, the way women do in movies when they win something. My mother clapped harder than anyone, her diamond tennis bracelet flashing under the chandeliers. I didn't move. I didn't even put my glass down. I just sat there in seat number 4, watching my father give away a $2.3 million property that he didn't own, that he had never owned, that had been in my name on a clean title since the spring of 2021. The lake house I had bought for my grandmother before she died, partly to make sure my brother and his then-girlfriend couldn't pressure her into signing it over. My father didn't look at me. He looked at my brother. He looked at my mother. He looked at my mother. He looked at the men he played golf with on Sundays. To him, I was a chair with a person in it. Before I tell you what I did, and trust me, I did something, I want you to do something for me. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I want to know how far across the country, or the world, this story is traveling tonight. Then come back. Because what happened in the next 40 minutes is something I still have to remind myself was real. I didn't stand up. I didn't say a word. I lifted my glass to my mouth and let the wine sit on my tongue. Bitter cherry, a little oak, and something underneath that tasted like a quiet decision being made. My name is Cordelia, but everyone calls me Della. I'm 31 years old, and to my family, I'm the sad sister. The one who works too much, the one who never married, the one who, my mother liked to tell her book club, buries herself in numbers because she doesn't have a husband to talk to. To about a dozen federal prosecutors in 3 different districts, I'm something else. I'm a forensic financial investigator who builds RICO cases against people who hide money inside legitimate businesses. I've been called as an expert witness on 27 federal cases. I've never lost one. I make my living looking at a pile of numbers and finding the lie inside it, and I was about to find one in my own dining room. I focused on my brother's wife. Her name is Brinley. She was wearing a dress that I knew, because I had seen it in a magazine at my dentist's office, retailed for $4,600. She'd been a real estate agent in Scottsdale until 18 months ago, when she had, by her own breathless social media announcement, stepped back to focus on her wellness brand. The wellness brand was a Shopify site selling Moonwater bath salts. 2 sales last month. I had checked. She didn't have $4,600 to spend on a dress. She had a fiancé who did. Or who said he did. His name is Holden. My brother. 3 years younger than me. The boy who shaved his head at 16 because he wanted to look like Eminem. The boy whose Audi I co-signed for at 22. The boy who, 2 summers ago at Thanksgiving, drank too much whiskey and told me he was going to out-earn me by 30, like he was challenging me to a foot race. He had taken a job last year at a private equity boutique that I had never heard of. I had heard of every legitimate boutique in his city. Every single one. So 3 months ago, when my mother kept bragging about the firm at brunch, I'd done what I'd do. I'd pulled the firm's filings. I'd looked at their LP disclosures. I'd run their lead partner through a database I'm not technically supposed to use for personal reasons. The lead partner had 2 open SEC inquiries. The firm wasn't an investment firm. It was a feeder. They were funneling money from a network of small, sloppy LLCs in 3 states into offshore accounts, and they were doing it through real estate. Specifically, vacation properties, lake houses, ski cabins, properties in the names of new wives. I had not, at that point, known my brother was going to marry one of these wives. 3 weeks ago, My mother had called me crying because Brinley's father had refused to pay for any part of the wedding. Then she had asked me, in that voice that always preceded an ask, whether I might be willing to help out a little with the venue. I had said no for the first time in my life. She had hung up on me. 2 days later, my father had called and said, very gently, that I had hurt her feelings and that I should think about what family meant. I had been thinking. I had been thinking very hard. I lifted my phone off the table and unlocked it. Around me, the applause was finally dying down. My father was beaming. My mother was dabbing at her eyes with a cloth napkin. My brother was leaning over to whisper something to Brinley that made her giggle and look at the ceiling. I opened the secure portal I use for work. I'm not supposed to use it from a personal device, but it was already authenticated from earlier in the day, and I needed 60 seconds. I typed Brinley's full legal name. I added her social. I had pulled it from a Christmas card she had sent me 2 years ago that had her insurance paperwork accidentally tucked behind it. I'm a thorough person. I keep things. The screen loaded. I stared at it. I stared at it for a long time. She was already a person of interest, not in the SEC inquiry on my brother's firm. In a separate, sealed federal trafficking case, a money trafficking case. She had moved through Arizona and Nevada in 2022 and 2023, taking quitclaim deeds on 3 properties from 3 different elderly men, 2 of whom were now deceased. My future sister-in-law was a serial deed predator, and my father had just announced, in front of 150 people, including 2 judges and a Vegas city councilman, that he was giving her a $2.3 million lake property on Sunday morning, which would have been very generous of him if the property had been his. I'll tell you something honest. For about 40 seconds, sitting there with my phone glowing in my lap, I considered letting it happen. I considered letting my father sign a forged quitclaim, letting Brinley take it to the Registry of Deeds in Placer County on Monday, letting her try to file it, and letting the title insurance company call me 3 weeks later with the world's most uncomfortable phone call. That would have ended my father in retirement. That would have ended my mother socially. That would have ended my brother professionally. And it would have ended Brinley in a federal courtroom. I considered it. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. But the lake house wasn't the point. The lake house had never been the point. The point was that my grandmother had taught me, on the dock behind that cabin, that you don't let a thief take a single fish from your line, because once they take one, they think the whole lake is theirs. I put the phone face down on the white tablecloth. I picked up my wine. I waited. My mother found me near the dessert station. I knew she would. She'd been watching my face for 20 minutes from across the room, the way she'd watched it my whole life, waiting to see whether I was going to make her look bad. She grabbed my upper arm, not hard enough to bruise. Hard enough to mean it. She pulled me into the little hallway by the kitchen doors where the catering staff was wheeling out plated cakes. The fluorescent light back there made her makeup look gray. She'd been crying happy tears for 40 minutes, and the foundation under her eyes had cracked into fine lines. She told me in a whisper that was almost a hiss that she could see my face from across the room. That I needed to fix it. That I was embarrassing her. I told her I was fine. I told her I was happy for my brother. She didn't believe me. She squeezed my arm tighter. She said the thing she'd been waiting all night to say. She said that I had so much. She said that I had my career, and my condo, and my money, and my freedom, and that my brother was just trying to start a life, and that the lake house was just sitting there empty most of the year, and that Grandma would have wanted family to use it. I asked her very quietly whether she remembered who had bought the lake house from Grandma. She blinked. She looked at me for a second like she was trying to remember a phone number from her childhood. And then she said, in a tone that was meant to be soothing but came out condescending, that the lake house had been in our family for 40 years and that paperwork was just paperwork. That was when I knew. That was when I knew for sure that my father hadn't just been generous and confused. He had known. He had known the title was in my name, and he had decided with my mother that they were going to publicly announce a transfer and dare me to make a scene in front of 150 people because they had decided that the kind of daughter I was would never make a scene. They had bet on my silence. They had built the whole night around it. I told my mother that she was right. I told her the lake house was just sitting there. I told her that Grandma would have wanted family to use it. I told her I was going to go back in there and hug my brother and welcome Brinley to the family. My mother's whole body softened. She let go of my arm. She pressed her hand to my cheek the way she used to when I was small and had done something she approved of, which was rare. She told me I was a good girl. She told me to come find her after I had hugged my brother so we could take a picture together. A family picture, finally. I walked back into the ballroom. The string quartet was playing something slow. My brother was at the head table, leaning back in his chair, one arm around Brinley, the other gesturing at his college roommate. The quitclaim deed was on the table next to him, weighed down by a cocktail glass. My father was standing behind him with a fountain pen, the kind he had been gifted for his 40th and only used on important occasions. I walked up to my brother. I put my hand on his shoulder. He looked up at me, and for a half second I saw the boy who used to sleep with his bedroom door open because he was scared of the noise the heater made. I told him congratulations. I told him I was proud of him. I told him that he and Brinley deserved a real beginning together, and that the lake house was the right gift. I leaned down. I told him to sign the deed now, to not wait, to get it in writing tonight while everyone was here as witness. Brinley looked up at me with a soft, surprised smile, the kind of smile that knows it just won something. My brother laughed and said he hadn't even read it. I told him it was a quitclaim. I told him it was a one-page document and that there was nothing to read. I told him to sign and date and let his wife sign and date and that I would witness it myself. My father, behind him, held out the pen. My brother took it. He signed his full name in the looping, oversized signature he had been practicing since he was 19. Brinley signed under him, neat and small. My father signed as the grantor. I signed as a witness. There was a notary at the door. My father had hired her for the evening. She'd been standing there in a black blazer next to the gift table for 2 hours, holding a stamp and a little embossed seal, looking bored. My father waved her over. She stamped the document. She logged it. The deed was now, technically, executed. It would not be filed until Monday, but it had been signed, witnessed, notarized, and accepted by a woman currently under federal investigation for serial deed fraud, in front of 150 witnesses, in a building owned by a hotel that ran its security cameras into its own private cloud archive that I, 2 months ago, had subpoenaed in an unrelated case. My father clinked his butter knife against his glass again. The room quieted. He announced with both hands raised that the gift had now been formally given, that Brinley and Holden were the new owners of the lake house, that his family was, at last, whole. He told the room to raise their glasses again. He told them to celebrate the beginning of a new chapter. People raised their glasses. They were tired and drunk, and they wanted dessert, and they raised their glasses anyway. I stood up. I said, in a voice that wasn't loud but carried, that I needed to add something before everyone toasted. The room turned to look at me. My father's smile didn't move, but something in his eyes did. My mother, 2 tables over, lowered her glass slowly. I told the room that I wanted to say a few words about the lake house, because it had been in our family a long time, and because tonight was a night for honesty. I walked to the podium. My father stepped back, because he didn't know what else to do. The microphone was still warm from his hand. I told the room my grandmother's name. I told them that she had bought the lake house in 1984 with the money she'd made selling her first real estate brokerage. I told them that she had taught me to fish on the dock behind it. I told them that when she was diagnosed with the cancer that eventually killed her, she had asked me, and only me, to take ownership of the property so that it wouldn't get tangled in probate or pressure. I told them she had sold it to me in the spring of 2021 for $1 and a promise. I told them I had the deed. I told them I had the receipt for the dollar. I told them I had her letter. I told them I had her letter. I told them my father had just given away a property he did not own. The room got very, very quiet. Somebody's fork hit a plate. My father started to speak. I lifted my hand. I told him I wasn't finished. I told the room that under normal circumstances, this would be an embarrassing family misunderstanding. A father overstepping, a daughter clarifying, something to laugh about at Christmas. But I said that the circumstances were not normal. I told the room that the woman who had just signed the deed, my new sister-in-law Brinley, was the subject of 3 open civil suits in Arizona and a sealed federal investigation in Nevada. I told the room that this was not the first lake house she had been gifted by an older man who had no legal authority to give it. I told them that the previous 2 such gifts had ended with the original owners' families locked out of their own homes and an elderly widow taking her own life in 2023. I am told my voice did not shake. I do not remember. My brother was on his feet. He was shouting that this was insane, that I was insane, that I was insane, that I had always been jealous of him, that I had always been jealous of Brinley, that I was a bitter old woman who couldn't stand to see other people happy. He grabbed the deed off the table. He ripped it down the middle. He ripped it again. He threw the pieces at the floor. He told the room that the deed was destroyed. He told the room that I was lying. I told him very calmly that the destruction of a notarized document does not erase the notary log. I told him that the notary log had been filed with the Clark County Registrar at 8:47 that evening, electronically, by the notary's tablet, which was now sitting on the gift table behind him. I told him that the document had also been photographed by Brinley herself 30 seconds after she signed it. I knew this because the hotel's security camera had caught her doing it, and the hotel's security feed was, as of 9 that morning, under a federal preservation order in a case I had filed an affidavit in last week. My brother sat down. He sat down so suddenly the chair almost slid out from under him. Brinley was staring at me. Not panicking. Calculating. I will say this for her. She was a professional. I pulled my phone off the podium. I had already made the call. I had made it from the dessert station, while my mother thought I was getting cake. The voice on the other end was a woman I had worked with for 4 years, a senior agent in the Las Vegas field office who had been waiting in a sedan in the hotel's circular driveway for 40 minutes. She walked into the ballroom with 2 men behind her. They were not in tactical gear. They were in suits. They looked, frankly, like wedding guests who had arrived late. She walked up to Brinley and asked her to come outside. She did not raise her voice. She did not say anything dramatic. Brinley stood up. She picked up her clutch. She walked out with them. My brother put his head in his hands. My father said my name. He said it the way he had said it when I was 11 and had brought home a B on a math test. I looked at him. I told him that the lake house was not his to give. I told him that the gift had been a fraud, and that the fraud was now in a federal evidence locker. I told him that the only reason he was not being arrested tonight was because I was choosing, in this single moment, to give him one more chance than he had ever given me. I told him that if he ever again attempted to move an asset of mine, name me on a document, or speak about my finances in a public setting, I would file the original quitclaim fraud charge against him personally and let him answer for it at 61. He didn't speak. He sat down at his own birthday table. He put both hands flat on the white tablecloth, palms down, like a man waiting for a verdict. My mother stood up. She came toward me. She was crying. I will tell you what she said because I want you to hear it. She said, "Della, sweetheart, please. He's your brother. She's not even worth this. Don't do this to your father on his birthday. We can fix this. We can take it all back. We can pretend it didn't happen. I want you to understand." She did not say she was sorry. She did not say she was wrong. She did not say she should have stopped him. She said we could pretend it didn't happen. I told her she could pretend whatever she wanted. I picked up my wine. I drained the last of it. I set the glass down on the podium, so gently it didn't make a sound. I told the room, with the microphone still hot, that I hoped they enjoyed the rest of their evening. I told them the chocolate torte was excellent. I had tried a bite from the dessert station while I was making my call. Then I walked out. I will tell you the part nobody asks about. The valet took 11 minutes to bring my car. I stood under the portiere of the Bellagio in a green silk dress and 3-inch heels in the October night air, and I was so cold my teeth were chattering by the time the kid pulled up in my SUV. He looked at me funny when he gave me the keys. I think he could tell I had been crying. I had not noticed I was crying. My father came out behind me. He stood about 10 feet away on the curb. He did not approach me. I think he was afraid to. He said my name once, and then he said he loved me, and then he said he was sorry, and then he said all 3 of those things again in a different order, like he was trying to find the combination that would make me turn around. I turned around once. I told him that if he ever called me again, I would block his number, and that if he ever showed up at my home or office, I would call the police, and that I meant it the way I meant everything I said. He looked at me like he had never seen me before. I drove east. I did not go home. I drove to my office downtown, parked in an underground garage, took the elevator to the 22nd floor, and let myself in with my badge at 11:42 at night. The cleaning crew waved at me. I waved back. I sat at my desk in my green silk dress and my 3-inch heels, and I opened a new file. I named it, in the case management system, with my brother's full legal name and Brinley's full legal name, and the date. Then I sat there for a long time. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel free of. I felt the way you feel after you performed CPR on a stranger and the paramedics have taken over, and you're standing in a parking lot at midnight realizing you've broken 3 of someone else's ribs to keep them alive and you don't know if it worked. I'll tell you the rest fast, because it isn't the part that matters. Brinley pleaded out 6 months later. She got 14 years. The 2 earlier widows' families got the houses back. My brother lost his job at the private equity firm because the SEC inquiry expanded and his name was inside it. He filed for divorce from the prison visiting room. My father had a small stroke in March. Not from this, his doctor said, but from blood pressure he had ignored for 15 years. My mother left him in May and moved in with her sister in Florida. None of them have my number anymore. The lake house is still mine. I drove up there in July. I sat on the dock where my grandmother had taught me to gut a trout. I drank a beer. I cried for about 20 minutes, and then I stopped, and then I didn't cry again. I want to say one more thing before I go. A lot of people, when they hear this story, ask me whether I regret it, whether I should have pulled my father aside, quietly, before the toast, whether I should have given him a chance to walk it back. I'll tell you what I tell them. He had 60 years of chances. He had 31 years of chances, with me specifically. He had 3 weeks since I told him no for the first time. He had the entire hour and a half between when he arrived at the Bellagio and when he stood at that podium. At any point in any of those moments, he could have chosen to be my father instead of my mother's husband. He didn't. So I didn't choose to save him either. I chose me. If you've ever sat at a table while your own family handed your life to someone else and called it generosity, I want you to know that the silence isn't kindness. The silence is the price they charge you for staying, and there's a moment, and you'll know it when it comes. When the price gets too high, you're allowed to leave the table, even if it's your father's birthday, even if there are 150 people watching, even if your hands are shaking, you're allowed to leave. I think about that night more than I admit. Not the part with the agents, or the deed, or my brother ripping paper across a white tablecloth. I think about the 11 minutes I stood under the porte-cochere waiting for my car when nobody knew yet whether I was the villain or the survivor. I was just a woman in a green silk dress trying to stop her teeth from chattering. What I learned that night and what I want to leave you with is that families like mine don't break in a single moment. They break the way a load-bearing wall breaks. Slowly, over 31 years of being asked to hold weight it was never designed for. My father did not wake up the morning of his 60th birthday and decide to commit fraud. He woke up the way he had woken up his entire adult life, believing that whatever I built belonged, eventually, to whoever he decided needed it more. Brinley did not invent her schemes the week she met my brother. She found a family that had been training a daughter, me, to fund their fantasies, and she simply offered to take over the route. My brother did not become a man who would sign a stolen deed in front of 150 people because he was evil. He became that man because nobody, including me, had ever once let him feel the weight of his own choices. That is the cause. The effect was a federal indictment and a divorce filed from a visiting room. The cause was 31 years of silence that I called love. Here's what I want you to take from my story. Your conscience is not a luxury. It is the only currency that compounds. When my father asked me, 3 weeks before that party, to pay for a wedding venue, and I said no for the first time in my life, I did not know I was saving myself. I just knew that the word yes had stopped fitting in my mouth. Listen for that. Your no, when it finally comes, will feel small. It will feel petty. It will feel like you are the problem. You are not the problem. You are the first honest thing the room has heard in years. Build your mind before you build your bank account. The reason I survived that ballroom is not because I had money. It is because I had spent 10 years learning to look at a pile of paperwork and find the lie inside it. I had built a skill that could not be taken from me by a vote at a dinner table. Whatever you are good at, whatever quiet thing you do that nobody in your family bothers to ask about, sharpen it. That is the thing that will walk you out of the room when you need to leave. And carry your nerve gently. My grandmother told me on a dock when I was 9 that you do not let a thief take a single fish from your line. She did not say it loud. She said it while she was cleaning trout. The strongest people I have ever met do not raise their voices. They raise the cost of crossing them. Be that kind of strong, quiet, documented, patient, unmovable. You are allowed to leave the table. You are allowed to keep your name on your own deed. You are allowed to be the daughter who finally said no.